In the early morning of December 1st, 1948, on Somerton Beach, Australia, two strangers approached a man lying against a wall, but their greetings went unanswered, and what happened next would send shockwaves through the community. Welcome back to Legends May Live, where we explore the strange, the mysterious, and the downright eerie. I'm Drew, and today we're exploring an event that's been shrouded in mystery for almost 80 years. And the more information that's gathered, the more bizarre it gets. On the evening of November 30th, 1948, John Lyons counted down his register at the end of another busy day. He closed up his shop and headed home to meet his wife for dinner, followed by a walk on the beach. They hit the sand around 7 p.m., and as they walked, they laughed and talked and went along the shoreline listening to the waves crashing in. It was just about the perfect evening. Even though it was a public beach, there were still few beachgoers. In fact, aside from one well-dressed man napping leaned up against a seawall, they had the beach to themselves. They were out strolling for about 20 minutes or so when they decided to turn around and come back down the stretch of beach that they had just walked. At around 7:30, they passed that well-dressed man again who, rather than napping, must have just had way too much to drink and passed out. The mosquitoes were starting to get bad and this guy was covered in them. So finally they ended their walk, headed home, and went to bed. The next day, John got up early for his morning swim in the ocean and made his way back out to the beach. This time, off in the distance, there was a man named Neil Day riding his horse along the shore. But between the two of them, John could see the man from the night before was still sitting in that same spot with the same uncomfortable head position. This time he went over to inspect. It would seem Neil had the same idea. Now, Neil and John had not met each other up until this point. This guy's presence on the beach was just strange and drew in both of their attentions. So they spot him slumped against the seawall, his suit neatly pressed, his shoes impossibly clean. He just looks out of place. As they start to get closer, they hear this sharp buzzing noise. And when they finally get within a few feet, they realize there's a swarm of flies all around his face. And that's when they realize this man is dead. John and Neil look at each other with horrified expressions. They immediately go to call the police. When the police arrive, they notice that the only footprints are from John and Neil's approach. There's no signs of how the man got there to begin with. The man is immaculately dressed. He's got on a brown suit, polished shoes, neatly knotted tie. Now, he was missing a hat, which may be normal for now, but for 1948 it was a bit odd. Even stranger, his shoes are spotless. Not a single grain of sand clings to the leather. How does a man walk across the beach without disturbing the ground or dirtying his shoes? And then, they check his pockets. He had no wallet, no ID, and no money. There was nothing you would expect to find on a man that was out and about on the town, and he certainly wasn't dressed for a swim. But what was even stranger was that all the labels on his clothing had been cut off, and not just worn off or ripped off, they were cleanly and deliberately removed. And if that wasn't odd enough, detectives then find the strangest clue of all. A tiny scrap of paper, buried deep in his fob pocket. It had two clean edges and two with frayed edges, as if it were deliberately torn out of something larger. The paper had two words, typed in an unfamiliar font. Tamám Shud. No one knew what this meant, or if it was even relevant to the case until a man brought a book into the police station. He had said it was left in the back seat of his car, but not by a passenger. The book was just dropped in the unlocked car while he was away. It was a rare book. The title, The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. The reason the book was significant is that the last page had been torn out. The very piece was in the dead man's pocket. The translation of the phrase on the paper was, "It is finished," or "the end." That prompted the question, what was finished? Was it referring to his life, or something else? But the mystery didn't stop there. Inside the book was what seemed to be a coded message, scribbled in pencil. It was 5 blocks of seemingly random letters. To this day, no one's been able to crack the code, if that's even what it is. But that's not all that was written in the mysterious book. It also had the unlisted phone number of a woman named Jessica Thompson, also known as Joe Thompson. Police had Miss Thompson come in for an interview, and though she adamantly refused to ever knowing the man, police say she gasped and nearly fainted when they showed her his photograph. She also claimed to have no idea how her number ended up in that book. While their only person of interest was getting them nowhere, investigators hoped the autopsy would provide a better angle to work off of. But even that proved mysterious. There were no outward signs of injury or foul play of any sort. He was also in relatively good shape for a middle-aged man, so immediately something like heart attack seemed unlikely. As the doctors did their work, sure enough his heart was fine, but as they continued the examination, doctors found that his stomach and liver were congested with blood. Not only that, his spleen was 3 times the size it should be, and his pupils were extremely constricted. Also, his limbs were oddly stiff, beyond the stage of rigor mortis where they begin to soften. All of this pointed to poison, but there were no detectable toxins found in his body, not even alcohol. Dr. John Dwyer, the first examiner, stated that he was convinced that the Somerton man was poisoned, but couldn't prove it. Sir John Cleland, the pathologist, suggested that poison was likely a fast-acting synthetic variety that left no trace, potentially something only a skilled chemist, assassin, or a spy would use. Eventually, the cause of death had to be ruled as simply unknown. Authorities continued looking for any shred of evidence to help in their investigation. They searched through missing person reports, but there's no one matching the man's description. They check his fingerprints against National Database, but that's another dead end. This case baffles authorities. At this point, they have an unknown man who died from an unknown cause at a relatively unknown time, at an uncertain location with a mysterious note in his pocket. Finally, another piece of unusual evidence surfaces, but it's one that only serves to frustrate the police even more. An abandoned suitcase is found at Adelaide railway station. Inside of it, they found a few personal items. There were some clothes, a screwdriver, a stencil kit used for marking cargo, but again, all the tags were removed, just like his clothing. Was he a sailor, a spy, a smuggler? If the suitcase was his, why was it left at the station? The biggest thing this suitcase contained was more questions and no answers. It's not clear when it came to light, but later on it was found that Jessica, the woman whose number was scribbled inside the rare book, spoke fluent Russian, which some theorists believe linked her to the Cold War espionage. Could the Somerton man have somehow gotten mixed up in espionage? Some speculate that perhaps he formed a romantic relationship with Jessica Thompson, eventually even having a child together. The reason for this is that her son and the Somerton man share a unique ear structure which is only present in about 1% of the population. Not only that, they also both had hypodontia, or missing teeth. It's a genetic condition commonly passed down with families. But that was all circumstantial. There was never any definitive evidence found directly linking the man on the beach to Jessica. For years, theories swirled. Poison? Espionage? A secret affair gone wrong? Finally, in 2022, a small but important breakthrough came. Forensic experts were able to extract DNA from the man's remains, and a match is found. His name? Carl Webb, also known as Charles Webb, a Melbourne electrical engineer with no known links to espionage. But he also wasn't a missing person. Though he had vanished decades earlier, even years before he was found on that beach, his family never reported him gone. Charles did have a wife, though they had split up. Some accounts say that he was becoming violent and unstable, leading to their eventual separation. But it's difficult to say what really happened. And how did Charles wind up on a beach 750 kilometers away, immaculately dressed, with no tags, a mysterious note, and full of untraceable poison? That's it for today's episode of Legends May Live. What do you think? Was Carl Webb a spy killed by an assassin? Was he a lost lover coming to see someone one last time? Or was he simply a man who fell victim to something far bigger than himself? Let us know your theories, and if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and send it to a friend who loves a good mystery. Until next time, keep your eyes open and keep a lookout, because it turns out legends may live.